Now, another prompting technique I can recommend, because it can sometimes be useful, is perspective prompting, where the idea simply is that you let ChatGPT assume different perspectives as it generates its response and its output. Now, the default pretty much is for ChatGPT to use no specific perspective. Like, for example, when you ask ChatGPT to create a travel plan for a 2-week yoga retreat in Austria. Here, I'm not asking for any specific perspective, and therefore I might get a fairly standard response. Now, the response I got here is actually not too bad, and could of course be fine-tuned by adding more information to the original prompt. We could add more details, we could add a role here, we could do all these things about which we learned. But we can also use this perspective prompting technique to let ChatGPT take on a certain perspective. For example, a single perspective, which in the end is assumed because of us engineering the prompt in a certain way. Here, for example, we could tell ChatGPT that it should create this travel plan from the perspective of a yoga trainer. Now, if we do that, we also get a plan, but now a plan that's meant to be used by a yoga trainer. And suddenly, it's a totally different plan. At least here for me, as always, when you run the exact same prompt, you might still get different results. But it's now a different plan meant to be used by the person who's hosting the yoga retreat. Now, of course, in the end, this is just us adding a role to the prompt though, just written in a slightly different way. We probably could have also written the prompt like this, where we tell ChatGPT that it should act as a yoga trainer. So in the end, by assigning a role, we already used this perspective prompting technique by giving ChatGPT a special perspective which it should use for generating the prompt. Now, the new thing is that you can also use multiple perspectives for generating the response. Again, by using prompt engineering. And an example would be to let ChatGPT have a discussion about a certain topic. Or in this case, create different plans for different people. For example, for people who like yoga and people who have to travel together with the people that do yoga but who don't like yoga themselves. Another example could be this prompt here, where we use ChatGPT to take on different perspectives on a given topic, in this case traveling by plane, to then have a discussion on this topic. And this could then help us argue with our friends, or preparing a blog post, or arguing with people on the internet, which is always a great idea. So this is also something we can do with ChatGPT. And the whole idea behind this perspective prompting thing, therefore in the end, simply is to ensure that you are aware of the fact that you can let ChatGPT take on different perspectives, either by assigning a single role or by not specifying any special role at all if you don't want any specific perspective, or, as I just showed you, by setting multiple perspectives, which definitely does not make sense for all prompts and all problems you might want to solve with ChatGPT, but which can be amazing for certain selected problems. Like this discussion here on traveling by plane. Now, with those slightly more advanced prompting techniques and concepts covered, it's again time to practice what we learned and to see more examples. And for this, I again created a couple of exercises, a couple of tasks you can go through, and a couple of tasks where I would definitely recommend that you try them on your own first, before then taking a look at my solutions, which I'll show you over the next lectures. But again, definitely give those tasks a try on your own first. And the goal, of course, is that you come up with prompts that in the end give you outputs that fit those tasks here. For example, for the first task, I want you to come up with a prompt that leads ChatGPT to create a modern minimal CV website where your image is included, and below that image a list of working experience and a list of skills is shown. And you should create a prompt that in the end leads to ChatGPT giving you the HTML and CSS code for such a website. And of course, you should also tell ChatGPT what the general structure of that website should be and which content should be in that website. That's the first task. And of course, as always, there will be an endless amount of possible solutions for this task. So definitely also share your solutions in the Q&A section with your fellow students. In the next lectures, I'll just show you a couple of possible solutions, a couple of possible prompts, which I came up with. Now, the second task will be about writing a newsletter email. So ChatGPT should, of course, write that newsletter email. You should write a prompt that leads to that newsletter email being written by ChatGPT. And in that newsletter email that should be written by ChatGPT, you want to have 2 new posts that you might have on some fictional website being mentioned by ChatGPT. So again, you should write such a prompt. And here I want you to use this ask before answer prompting technique to make sure that ChatGPT writes a better newsletter email than it might write without that technique being used. Now, last but not least, for this last exercise here, I want you to, in the end, get ChatGPT to give you the code for a program that takes some input text and then encodes that text by shifting every character 1 character to the left, so that a D, for example, becomes a C, an E would become a D, and so on. And I want you to come up with a prompt that in the end gets ChatGPT to give you the code in 2 different languages, which could be considered to be a use case for perspective prompting. So these are your tasks. Definitely try coming up with those prompts and getting those results on your own. In the next lectures, we'll go through them together. Now, for this first task, I came up with this prompt here, where I in the end again set a role and a goal as so often, and then I use one-shot prompting in the end here to give ChatGPT the template that should be used, so to give ChatGPT detailed instructions regarding the structure of the output. And I also provided the actual content that should be used, like for example here, these positions and companies and the time when I've been there. And then in the very end, I just again mentioned that I want to have this modern minimal website and that the above mentioned structure and content should be used. And if we send this to ChatGPT, it therefore should give us this HTML and CSS code that produces some website, or that gives us some website that generally has that structure. So here it produced this code snippet for me, which I can therefore of course copy, and which, once pasted into an HTML file, leads to this website. Once I replaced the image with an actual image of me positioned next to this HTML file. And whilst we could of course still refine this website and definitely improve it, for example with some follow-up prompts here, it's definitely not a bad result. I especially like that it shows a different styling here for the skills and did not just output a boring list. And therefore here, I'd say we got a decent result for this prompt where we in the end defined an exact template or an exact structure that should be used by ChatGPT. Now, for the second task, where I wanted you to practice ask before answer prompting, I came up with this prompt here. where I again assign a role and then set my goal, highlighting that I want an engaging newsletter email. I then add some extra context and I, for example, make it clear that, of course, email readers should be intrigued to click on those blog posts. So I want ChatGPT to write that email so that recipients really want to interact with that email. I then provide some information about the two blog posts, but then I also add this extra paragraph where I tell ChatGPT that it should ask for extra information in case such information is needed to improve the newsletter email before it's being drafted by ChatGPT. Now with this prompt here, indeed ChatGPT goes ahead and asks for some extra information, like, for example, who the target audience of the newsletter is and what the name of the organization that's sending the newsletter is, along with some other questions for extra information. So now here I'm then simply providing the answers to those follow-up questions. And with that, ChatGPT then goes ahead and drafts me an email that I could send as a newsletter that has the tone and wording and content that I want to have to get my readers to hopefully read those blog posts, to dive deeper, and to hopefully also share those blog posts with others. And that's therefore then here my solution for this second task, using this ask before answer prompting technique.